Howdy folks, welcome back. Today we're going to have a little discussion on the progress of the 243 Winchester here on the channel so far, and kind of recap my range trip from today instead of you guys waiting for all 2 or 3 of these videos to come out. So we'll just have one cool little recap here, and then you can go and watch all the other crap as those come out later if you're into that sort of stuff. So last week we were talking about how crappy these triggers are. I don't have a trigger pull weight gauge, but I could imagine it's up in the tons, you know, several tons of pull weight on this trigger here. So Alabama Reloaders suggested, why don't you just open it up, pull the spring out, essentially chop off a coil or 2 or whatever until you get it dialed in. And I did that. It's not quite as light as I would like it, but it's at least 178 times better than it was. So I felt much better today, even after what happened with this target. I'll get into that here in a second. But the trigger feels a whole lot better. I feel good about not having to spend an additional 150 bucks here in the short term and potentially the long term. I'm gonna do a little bit more work on it and try and lighten that up just a little bit more. I'm not worried about it being drop safe or anything like that. I know it's a cheap hunting rifle, but I'm just shooting paper and steel and whatever. So I don't need it to be able to withstand falling out of a tree or anything like that. So if it gets too light, you know, I'll buy a new spring. Anyways, we're gonna break this sucker down. I'm gonna work on the trigger a little bit more, and we're gonna clean the heck out of it. It's been probably 150 rounds since I gave it a good scrub down. And I went ahead and I made some of my own Ed's Red. Ed's Red, there you go. It's 1 part kerosene, acetone, mineral spirits, and automatic transmission fluid with Dextron. And you can see it's got this awesome red color. It has a horrendous smell, so you know you probably want to have a nice ventilated area when you're working. But we're going to be giving the gun a nice scrub down, and I'm going to be trying out the old homemade Ed's Red here shortly. But as you can see, we're in a mason jar, so if you guys know of a good container that I can use to squirt, you know, is there a good plastic that can withstand the acetone and whatnot? I know there's some that break down, and I don't want to have a big puddle in my garage here. So if you know a good container with a squirt bottle or a cap or something that lets me pour this onto cleaning pads and whatnot, please let me know in the comments. Thank you very much in advance. So anyways, I said I was very pleased with the trigger, and I was very displeased with my first outing here today. So I'm basically an idiot and can't see anything, apparently, you know. So last week I ended up the session shooting the cast loads. I had to move up my adjustment. I remembered that it was 1 mil up. I adjusted, perfect. Came out today, I go, okay, I'm shooting jacketed again at the other distance that I adjusted from. So let me just change my 1 mil, and instead of turning 1 mil down, I dialed up another mil. And if you can imagine these two belonging to this point of aim, you can pretty much picture where these other 4 groups are. So that's funny. Way to go, dummy. And although they were only 3-shot groups, you know, if these two are probably 1 inch apart, we don't know where shot 3 is. This could be worse than I think. But I did get chronograph data. That was good, I reckon. Although I was using Shooter's World match rifle with the 87 grade Hornady Bowtail Hollow Point Varmint. And the thing is, there's no more Shooter's World match rifle to be had. I loaded all that up in some AR blasting ammo and whatnot, so even if one of these was amazing, that's unfortunate because I can't load any more of it, not at least until, you know, if I ever want to buy any more of that powder, we'll see. But real quick, looking at our velocities, 35 grains, an average 2864, moving up to 36.2 was our max, topped out at 2948. So right under 3,000 for an 87 grain bullet. That's pretty weak sauce for a 6 mil. You know, most of the competition high speed guys, they're shooting 105s, 109s, 115s, I think. Those are all going 3,000 feet per second also. But we had an extreme threat of 30 and a standard deviation of 12, which is pretty good for a ball powder. Charges were thrown off the Charge Master, so Pretty consistent there with the ball powders, that's nice. But although we can see these other charges had some wider swings, 154 at that. And we only got one reading here, so on and so forth. Did not hit target, lol, and also out of powder, lol. But that was my first 15 shots of the day, and I think I was too happy about the trigger feeling that much better that this didn't really upset me that much. So I was just kind of laughed it off, and we'll move on to the next target. And our next target is based off last week's target. We picked 9 grains of red dot for our RCBS 244 95 grain. So with that in mind, let's take our 9 grains of red dot. And we were testing approximately 5/1000ths of jam with our seating depth. We were recently discussing overall length and that this is actually known as a bore rider design. It's meant to come right up there and not have a whole lot of room to go either way. Sit right on your lands, that's where you seat it, done. Pretty convenient design if you understand that concept, but if you go back a few weeks in my videos, you'll be like, man, this guy's a dummy. He doesn't know how this bullet works. I was confused as to not being able to adjust my seating depth in or out at all. So that was fun, but today we were testing 5/1000th further out than we previously were. And while I was loading, I only had 22 of them left with gas checks, so I sized enough to load up the rest of my brass, so we had 6 without gas checks. And I was running the chronograph. I should have probably separated the two, but between the non-gas checked and the checked, all 28 shots, we had an average of 1584, a spread of 58 feet per second, and our standard deviation was 13 with the 9 grains of red dot. Not too horrible. I'm pretty sure this would be tighter if I had segregated the 2 sets of data, but I was going round robin back and forth between my targets, so that would have been kind of hard to track for a dummy like myself. But here is our target. Here's 22 shots with the gas check and 6 without gas checks over here. And upon further inspection, this is looking more like 5 shots. Maybe I was just aiming over here for one of them, but we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 right here. And our first time out, this was about our group size. Right at 0.5, that's like a point, wow, those 4 are pretty good right there. That's a 440, but we had this one come out low, so we're up near 0.730 for those 5 shots. So it's still pretty close comparison to last week with gas checks and a different seating depth, so that's kind of interesting. And then if we take a look at this group, we do have a few obvious flyers there. There's 4 kind of on the perimeter there, but this main cluster, that's 22 minus 4 would be 18 shots. 18 shots inside of 0.9 inches. Yeah, that's pretty okay. And yeah, if we open that up, we're at 1.4, 1.5, somewhere in there. I'm not trying to sugarcoat it or anything. We were at 50 yards, so realistically this is 3 MOA, this is 1.5 MOA out at 100 yards. So maybe if we can dial in and see what's causing our little flyers here. More than likely, I can just imagine it being imperfections in my casting, in the alloys. They're not all perfectly mixed up with each pour, so they could have maybe slight voids or slight inconsistencies in the weight distribution. There's 1,024 variables when you're working with cast, even more so than jacketed. But 9 grains of red dot, that's just, it seems like a nice go-to. I'm not gonna worry about jamming anymore. I'll just go back to our original seating depth. And I think I'm gonna try without gas checks too, because we'll be able to save on that material. These suckers are getting expensive. They're $40, $50, $60 per 1,000 these days. So, you know, that's 5 or 6 cents for a cast shot, which you're not supposed to have any cost into, right? Or at least in my mind, if I'm shooting a cast bullet, it's to save money, not to dump as much money into it and try to improve it to make it what it's not. Does that make sense? If I want to shoot jacketed for accuracy at distance, I'm going to do that. If I want to shoot cheap and light and low recoil, reduced loads, I'm going to shoot cast bullets for that. You see what I'm saying? Anyways, 9 grains of red dot, pretty cool. I'm gonna try without gas checks and at the seating depth that doesn't jam into my lands. Very cool. Oh, and also we're gonna be trying 700X, Unique, 2400, and 4227. So I've got 4 other cast powders, and we're gonna try and push up to 2,500 feet per second just because that's what the data says for 4227. I'm not expecting any kind of accuracy up that fast or anything like that, but it'll be fun to try, right? You know, I hear people, very few have luck and are capable of casting for their ARs. So if you can get your little 223 to, you know, a hard enough alloy with a gas check and the proper powder that makes enough gas, people are able to shoot cast loads in their AR-15s with powder coating, gas checks, and so on and so forth. So more powders with the cast bullets coming up. And then I was kind of up late last night. It was like 2 in the morning. I was like, man, I want to try something, right? Let's go try something. And that's never good when it's 2 in the morning and you're like, let's just go try something. But I had a new box of bullets, the Spear 70 grain. You can get in a bulk package 750 quantity, I believe. Anyways, I found one of those and 70 grain flat base hollow point. Pretty cool, right? It was, it's the cheapest jacketed bullet I'm pretty sure is available. It's a Spear TNT, I believe. Much like the 125 grain people like for 300 Blackout. This is the 6mm equivalent of that. So a good bulk, high volume, and yet still somewhat capable projectile. So we were looking up some data and we landed on IMR 4064. I was using the Lee data, which is a copy of the Hodgdon data. They list 38.5 up to 42.5 grains. We were testing 40 to 42 grains, so I started right in the middle and I stopped short of our maximum charge. I had 4-shot groups for everything except the middle group, 41 grains. And with our overall length gauge, we found our lands at 2.711 overall length. And I seeded these just under that. You know, depending on the inconsistencies of my bullets, they were seeding at 2.707 to 2.709, which is an average of 3,000ths off our lands. Okay. So we'll take a look. Here's our first group, 41 grains, 4 shots. Nice little vertical stringing action, right? Right, yeah, okay. Well, we had an average 34, 38 feet per second, extreme spread of 30, and a standard deviation of 11. Pretty consistent, but this little vertical stringing right out the gate, not too promising. We bump it up a half grain, 40.5 grains. We now have an average of 35.71, extreme spread of 40, and a standard deviation of 14. Seems like that vertical stringing stopped and we kind of tightened up a bit. And we are back at 100 yards now. We're no longer at 50, but our 4-shot group here is a .812. So that's not too bad, right? And what was this first one? Probably 1.5 inches. Yeah, we're at 1.3 for this first one. And man, you know, if I shot a 5th one, it'd probably be here or here, and it would open up. So that's why I like more than 3-shot groups, but this is all the brass that I had, so deal with it. Okay, so we moved up to 41 grains, and this one I actually had 5 shots for. It was our middle charge, so I just said we'll do that. So we got all 5 shots read on the chronograph, an average 35.49. That's pretty smoking hot for a 70 grain bullet. I mean, maybe, I don't know. Sounds good in my mind. Extreme spread of 17 and a standard deviation of 7. That's pretty consistent right there. Very nice. And it's also probably our best looking group here. You can see a slight point of impact shift. This one is low left at about 7 o'clock. This one is low right, maybe 5:30 or 5 o'clock here. But we have all 5 shots there. And we are right at 0.72. Yeah, somewhere inside to inside, we're about 0.7 or 0.72 inches at 100 yards. That's pretty decent right there. And, you know, if you could look in the future, I'm going to tell you this is the one we're going with. So, yay, 41 grains. It was our most consistent as far as velocity, and it was also our best on the paper. Very nice. But anyways, I didn't know that until I tested these. So 41.5 grains, again, 4 shots. I was afraid we were gonna be throwing them off the paper. It started going low. So we've got 2 here and 2 here, kind of starting to double group. Like it's still hitting this point of impact up here, but then it's splitting up where this higher charge is starting to go. So any faster than that and we're gonna be off the page, brother. But this one is pretty gross looking. Yeah, we're at 1.2, 1.11, somewhere in there. And although we had some good numbers on the chronograph, velocity 3588, extreme spread 22, standard deviation of 7 again. Pretty consistent, but it looks again like we're double grouping here. It's starting to split off to different points of impact. And then we kick it up another half grain to 42. We're starting to see slight primer cratering, which apparently is a trademark of the Savage Axis. They have very loose specs on their firing pins and the little hole that comes out of, thus allowing primers to flow back into that. So it looks like you're cratering your primers before you would be otherwise. Anyways, velocity jumps up quite a bit to 36-35. Extreme spread all over the place, 101 feet per second. And standard deviation of 36. And you can see it just went all to hail. So that's a good thing we didn't try to hit the max. You know, more often than not, I find somewhere in the middle or even on the low end, your accuracy is totally acceptable. So in my case, where I'm just shooting paper and not hunting, I don't need energy on target. If I can find accuracy, I'm cool, brother. That's cool with me. But like I said, shifting way down low. It was grouping up here, and then we're just about to fly off the page. And these are, you know, they felt like good shots. I was pretty stoked about the trigger upgrades once again. And we're at 1.6, you know, 1.63. That's pretty gross. So like I said, we ended up at 41 grains. So yes, we're gonna use 41 grains here. And now we have a lot of room to where we can start seeding this bullet back into the case further. So we have a nice little powder node here that we can find some decent velocity in. I've had good luck with IMR 4064 in 223 and 308 before, so I'm not surprised to find good consistency here in the 243. So, like I said, here's our charge weight, and we're going to be testing seeding depth from now on, at least with this bullet. I've got a couple others that we're still playing with other powders and whatnot, and just still getting acquainted with the gun and breaking it in and so on and so forth. You know, I hear it takes 200 or 300 rounds just to break in your barrel, and the cast rounds don't count because they're never going to burn out your barrel. They're too soft. So I've got probably another 100 or 200 rounds of jacketed to run through my barrel before we're even broken in, you know? So we could be gaining more velocity, more and more velocity this whole time. So, you know, that's always fun. It'll be, could be interesting to maybe load up 100 of these, measure our jump before that, go and shoot them real hot and see if we can erode 1,000th out of our barrel or something silly. I'm sure it takes several hundred more rounds than that, but in my mind, you know, it'd be fun to test. And after today, we have a total of 214 rounds through the gun, but time to break her down. We're gonna work on the trigger, and we're gonna clean her up and test out some Ed's Red homemade cleaning solution there. So anyways, I appreciate you guys hanging out. Go check out the Component Hunter on Dummy Round Reloading. Go and find some components and get into reloading, or stock up on your favorites you already know about. But anyways, thanks for hanging out. We'll see you in the next video. Have a good one.